Hello everyone. In today's video tutorial, I'm going to show you how to secure an S3 bucket so that only specific roles or users will be able to access the bucket information. The way we're going to restrict access to our bucket, we'll need to explicitly specify what roles and user will have access to our bucket. Otherwise, even if those other users or roles have admin privileges, they won't be able to access it. In the diagram, you can see we'll be creating a bucket with the bucket policy and a role assigned to it. When we assign a role to the function, we get access to the bucket information. We are also going to create a very simple serverless service and call it accessless monkey, just to show you what happens when our Lambda function don't have access to the correct role. So let's get started. Using the serverless CLI, let's generate the project. Now let's open the project in VS Code. I'm going to take a shortcut here and copy the content of my serverless.yaml file. The special attention here is to the resources section. The serverless framework allows you to declare raw CloudFormation resources directly. So that's what we are doing here. We're also declaring here a stored bucket value. It's composed of our service, the stage, name, together with the store. So now let's copy the resources. In here, we are declaring our bucket. As you can see, our bucket name references the store bucket that we just declared here in the custom section. Next, let's see our role definition. As you can see here, we are saying that this role will only allow Lambda functions to assume this role, but in practice, you can also assign this to an EC2 instance of any other service that you want to. In here, as you can see, we are declaring two managed policies that we're declaring here. So let's see it right now. This is our bucket policy. This is really the most important resource because in here, we are saying who will have access. You see in our statement, we have a deny rule for all S3 actions for our S3 bucket. We also have a condition where we are excluding the roles and users we want to give access to. We are excluding here the role we just declared, and we are getting the role ID. As you can see here, we are using a special notation to get the role ID using an external serverless plugin named Serverless Sudo parameter that we previously declared in the plugin section. Remember, this is the role you need to assign to an application to be able to access the bucket. It is important to exclude the serverless user so that the serverless framework can update the bucket policy. I am also excluding my current username role so that I can access the bucket. Below we can see a policy to restrict access to only S3 actions to whoever will assume the role. The last policy is to assign permissions to write to Cloudwatch log groups. The reason we need this is because when you manually assign a role to a Lambda function, the serverless framework won't generate those to write to Cloudwatch logs. So we need to manually create them. We're going to make use of this role in just a few when we create our accessless monkey service. Now we're almost ready to deploy our application, but before we do that, we need to first install the serverless Sudo parameter plugin. For that, we're going to use npm. First, we need to generate an npm package.json. And now we need to declare the dependency. Now let's install it. And now we're ready to deploy. Now that our deployment is ready, let's go and verify our bucket policy. For that, let's jump to the AWS console. And from there, let's go to the S3 service page. As you can see here, these two buckets, this one belongs to the serverless framework, and this is the bucket that we just declared to be created. Now let's go to the permissions and then bucket policy. As you can see here, this is our bucket, and these are the roles and user ID that we're exploring. Now, to make sure that this is working correctly, I am going to remove the role of my user, and I should lose access to see the bucket. So for that, let's go and comment the role ID and redeploy the application. Okay, it's done. Now let's go and refresh the page. As you can see here, I don't have access anymore to see the bucket. If you see here an error, it means that I have no access to do anything on the bucket. So now let's go ahead again. And redeploy with my role ID excluded, so I should get access back. Okay, let's refresh the console, and now it's back. I can go to the permissions, to the bucket, and I can see it again. So far, we have verified our bucket policy working for users. Now is the time to create our accessless monkey. Accessless monkey is just a Lambda function that will try to read objects from our bucket. So let's go ahead and do it. I'm going to create a serverless service using the CLI. Now let's open up our project. Next, I'll just copy the content of the service. This is a very simple service that defines a Lambda function that will try to read an object from our bucket. We are explicitly giving access to any S3 bucket to our function, and we are defining our Lambda function. Next, we are going to define our Lambda code. Now let's copy our function code. As you can see, our function is also very simple. We're using the Vodo3 library, so we can read an object and print the result. So after this, we are ready to deploy our code. So let's go ahead and deploy it. Now that our code is deployed, let's go to the AWS console and try our Lambda function and see what happens. We can test our function from within the console. Using this functionality, we need to define a test object because we're not interested in sending any parameter. We can just pass an empty object and put a name here. As you can see, it failed. Now let's see what is the error. The error is saying access denied. So what happened is our Lambda function don't have access to do anything in our S3 bucket. The reason why our Lambda has no access to our bucket is because it's not using the correct role, the one we defined initially. The one we defined here. So now let's go to the AWS console and find that role name and assign it to our access monkey function. We copy the role ARN. And with the serverless framework, we can redefine a role property and put the role ARN. Now let's redeploy our application. Now let's go and test again our Lambda function. Now you can see we are getting a different error. This error means Boto3 library cannot find the specified object because we are trying to read the happy cat image and we haven't uploaded any image. So, but this means that now the function has got the right access, but just in case, let's upload the correct object to our bucket. Now let's try our Lambda function one more time. As you can see, now it worked. If we check the logs, you will see this is the response. I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial and don't forget to subscribe for more. See you on the next one. Hasta la próxima.